Hi, my name is the Playwright, and I'm here at the Bosque Village with Brian Fey, the founder of Bosque Village, and I'm going to talk with him about just what Bosque Village is and what his plans are for its future. So, Brian, can you tell us about Bosque Village?
I certainly can. I'd be happy to. But what was your name?
It's the Playwright.
The Playwright.
Yes.
You're using that while you're here. That's just fine. The Bosque Village is a project I started in 2004 and prepared much before that to create it. It's a cultural laboratory in the middle of a forest. You're visiting, of course, so you're learning about what it is and how it functions. The goal is to design better human culture that has aspects of agriculture and energy. How can we make a sustainable future for your humanity? How can we really solve world problems, but at the very personal level? So that's the shortest version I can give of it.
Okay, that's good. Bosque's been around for 14 years, and you and Alicia are the only constants here. What is your plan for drawing permanent residents?
Right. So, yeah, I've been a hermit here for some years. I've had other people a lot of times. Right now, it's me and Alicia. My plan for attracting other people, it's very easy to attract people if I make it comfortable and easy to be here. But I need to get a core team together. And I need a core team of 4 to 6 people who are here most of the year. My current plan with that is to describe better the goals of the place, which we're doing in videos, write it up better, make social agreements with people so that they can win by being here and the Bosque can win, and also have it be a place I want to be. So it's really just about letting more people know about the project and finding those few people for whom it would be correct. I'm not trying to attract the public. In fact, people have to apply before they even can come here because we want to make sure we're working together in tune with each other, so we're really creating something of great value.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So some people could be interested in staying part-time over the long term, many years. How will you target bringing those folks into Bosque Village?
Kind of like part-time residents?
Yes.
Yeah. Or yeah. I've really liked it when people come back because they've already got the idea, they know what to expect. And so we have had repeat visitors for short periods of time. And we've had some people who have stayed here for like 5 months, which is awesome. I like to have about half Mexicans and about half foreigners here. Yeah. So there is actually a market out there for having foreigners that live part of the time in the U.S. and part of the time here. And again, it's just a matter of explaining to them what it is, having them visit, see if they like it, and some of them will come back. Now, some of those people are seasonal because they're escaping the cold in the north and they want to come down for the winter.
Yeah.
And there's other people like teachers who have the summer free and they can come down during the summer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you've had a staff of 5 or so at the Bosque in the past. To what degree were you successful at influencing them to the Bosque way of life?
Right. The local staff, the people who live in a town nearby, to what degree have I influenced them? I've worked with them for years. I'm not currently employing them because I don't have the funds, which is too bad. It isn't really the goal directly to influence them. But of course, being here in the space, having contact with a lot of foreigners, having contact with alternative ideas about energy and agriculture, there is a lot of influence there. A lot of that's just educational. In other cases, they've actually adopted some of the tools that I use here. Mm-hmm. So we have a chainsaw attachment, for example, for making beams. Mm-hmm. Well, it used to be that they would sell a tree to a mill, and then if they need to build something on their house, they have to buy the beam back. Mm-hmm. So this small tool, when they see it, they say, well, wait a minute, how much does that cost? And so I've influenced the culture by making them more powerful with their own resources. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other cases where we can try out technologies like a solar oven. Mm-hmm. If we try a solar oven here and we think it's neat, then we wonder, will it work in Yotatiro? Will it work in the small town? If it doesn't work there, then it might not really be appropriate technology.
Okay.
And you see a lot of people going into places and saying, hey, do this cool thing, mm-hmm. and the people accept it. 3 years later, you'll go back, no one's using it. Because it doesn't really fit in the culture. Mm-hmm. So as we think hopefully very creatively about all kinds of ways to do things here, we want to then see if they actually fly in rural Mexico. But yeah, the goal isn't really to come in as outsiders and say, do this thing. You know, I don't really like it when organizations or people do that. These people here know what they're doing, and they know why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. So it's my job, the job I like to have, to just bring in ideas and show examples of other ideas, and if they work for them, it's great. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah, and you had at least one person who was spending a lot of time at Bosque Village who learned the carving trade.
Right. Now, that was a great case where this guy, he's a friend of mine, he was working for me, and for a bit I really didn't have anything for him to do, and I feel an obligation to provide him with work for his family. These are not people who are well off. So I said, hey, here's a book about carving, you know, and it had step-by-step how to make this particular sculpture, every cut. And so I said, here, try this out. And I lent him the tools, and so he tried it out, and he made a really cool-looking sculpture. And then I said, well, try making some more sculptures. And they weren't very good. But then he kept making sculptures. Now he's a really good wood carver.
Yeah.
And so I feel proud of that. I feel proud that I can be part of a community. Not so much as like an outside person coming in and saying what to do, but just as a good friend, as a good person where I live. I can encourage that, and I can improve the place artistically, economically, and just, you know, build up my friends to be more powerful people.
Yes. Yeah, that's novel. And you also influenced at least 4 people in the surrounding areas to use an apparatus for a chainsaw to cut the line smoother. Right,
the beams. And that was great, because as soon as people see that, they clue in really quickly.
Yeah.
You know, hey, how much money is that going to save me? You know, and now with that one guy just asked me in town, he ran into me and he said, what's the brand on that thing?
Yeah.
So I wrote it down for him because his son's up in California, and he's going to get himself one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So could future employees be a way to spread interest in organic foods in places such as Yotatiro?
Sure. And how much influence I can have there is unclear. But anything we do here, as we share it with other people, we're introducing options for people. Mm-hmm. One example of that is that a lot of times people in rural areas don't really know what they have. They don't know what value they have. Mm-hmm. And so we started a bread class up in Zarzamora, a different town. And we said, hey, you know, you folks make bread. You're really nice people. Can we send students to you? And they said, sure, let's try that. And so we sent some students up to them, and the students show up at 10 in the morning or something, and they make the dough, and then they get some lunch, and they drink some liqueurs that those people make, and then they bake all the bread. And the visitors have a great time. The family got better and better at it, you know. They got very comfortable with having these foreigners in their house, and everybody's joking around and having a good time. And the students paid for the class, and that family actually made more money off students than off the bread that they sold.
Wow.
So that's a win for everyone. Mm-hmm. That's taking a resource, this experience, and helping rural people understand that people from Europe and the United States want to have these cool experiences. I call that deep travel, where instead of just going to a place and taking pictures of a sculpture, you know, or buying a postcard, you actually get to do things. And those students, when they got back here, you know, they're fat with all this bread. They have a nice lunch, sometimes eating things like chicken feet, you know, and they're just happy. They've had a wonderful day.
Yeah.
So deep travel is something I want to work more on. We actually have pottery class in town. We also have that here. We were working on another bread class in another town. There's weaving. There's all these things people can do that instead of just traveling and seeing, they can travel and be part of the culture.
Yeah. It sounds like deep travel could be a way to boost the economy of Yotatiro.
Exactly.
Yeah. So describe for me the process of developing and selling the colored eggs you've told me about.
Oh, right. We were talking about chickens.
Yeah.
I've had chickens for a long time. Now I'm kind of ramping up my chicken system, and I want to make a super coop and all that. But one of the ideas is to figure out how in this area we could actually have a unique product. There's a couple kinds of chickens. One in particular, I think it's Araucana or something. I've only read the name, I've never said it. And they have light blue and light green eggs. There's other ones too. They're called Easter eggers. And so I'm thinking, okay, how can we make a distinguishable egg product? You know, how can we make something different? Mm-hmm. And the only thing I can think of when you look at the egg is to have colored eggs. So I'm thinking about, over time, getting rid of all the chickens I have now and focusing on this one breed and then breeding them for a while to make sure I have really good color in the chickens and the eggs. And then starting to sell laying hens to other people, particularly selling those to people who already sell eggs. Because there are purepecha ladies, the local indigenous people, who sell eggs in the market. So what happens if they start showing up with these colored eggs? And we could start a rumor that, you know, they're more healthy. They're not, they're the same. Or that they make you more virile. As far as I know, that's not true. But suddenly people, when they come to Aronga, this amazing town, this becomes another element of uniqueness. Mm-hmm. And that for me is fun because it's fun to breed things.
Yes.
And again, building the economy. You know, and we could do that in a whole variety of products where we can use online resources, fitting tourism in with better products and everything.
Yes. Now, you've said that if it won't work in Yotatiro, it probably won't work elsewhere, as a sort of rule of thumb for how you might approach selling your products in an open market. So what are your ideas for selling organic products to people in Yotatiro who are used to paying much less for what they have?
It's tough because I could make fancy products and sell them in Pátzcuaro to foreigners, to expats, or to richer people in urban areas. Mm-hmm. I could make specialty products, and that's very tempting because the income would be nice. And I'm not against it completely, but it's sort of a false win. If we're really focused on making products that are sustainable for the future, then yeah, I want to serve the people who are not so well off in a rural area. Of course, I'm competing with the industrial world. Rabbits are a good example of this. I was raising rabbits for a while, and the way I raise rabbits, although it's very easy and healthy and the rabbits are awesome, in order to compete, I have to compete with the industrial chicken system. And they have economies of scale. They have big warehouses full of chickens that are horribly treated, and they transport them in big trucks in tiny cages. And so I can't really compete on price right now. But we're also planning for a world in which energy is more expensive. And so that gasoline to transport them, the systems, the larger systems may become more expensive. And so it could be that I can promote solutions at a smaller scale. Now, it's just going to be, in any case, very difficult to make money here. Everybody here, if they want money, they go up to the States to work. So the biggest employer in Yotatiro is a winery in California. And so there's just an inherent economic difficulty there. My hope is to continue developing solutions that still work out, figure out which ones actually can pencil out now, and even if it isn't totally profitable now, continue to refine those systems so that as society changes and as there's more difficult times, we have those solutions ready for the entire world.
Yeah. Okay. So what products does Bosque make and where are they sold?
We've experimented with a lot of different products.
Yes.
And we've done more experimentation than actually creating sustainable economic products. We've created, rabbit fur hats.
Okay.
Because we learned how to tan hats. I use those. Those are really warm. They're great. We've created wooden sculptures that are artistic. We've produced lots of food. And that's difficult because I'm so alone here most of the time. There's been years where we produced so much food that it was just way too much, and I just gave it away. Now, a smarter businessman would have been like, okay, how can I sell this? And so that's tricky. We have gone to a market. It's the Feria Alternativa, the alternative fair. With that, I've sold books in English, not my product. We've sold shoes that are made in a women's prison in Morelia.
Okay.
We've sold hummus. We sold jars of hummus. We know how to can things. We could sell kimchi. I think we sold kimchi once. I've sold some of my art. That does not sell that well because the original art, there just isn't the money here to support it. I forget what else we've tried to sell. But basically, I mean, that hasn't been the biggest thing. It's just, in this rural place, there's just not a lot of ability to sell products at a level that would actually make it worth making them.
Yeah.
The other option is to sell things like on eBay or further away. Again, that's piggybacking off the industrial world. Not necessarily a bad thing to do, but doesn't target the underlying goal of having things be sustainable at the lowest level.
Yeah.
Still, if I could sell my art online, I could finance the whole project. I think the biggest product we have, without a doubt, is the experience of being in the Bosque. Mm-hmm. That's what I can sell. And there have been people who have come here from Europe and the United States and Argentina, and they've had life-changing experiences living with less electricity, living in nature. For a lot of people, it's very different. Mm-hmm. Living with people who also, like them, are trying to figure out how can we live in a new world, a better world.
Yes.
And so I think that's probably the number one product we have is the Bosque experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what kind of participants do you like to have at the Bosque?
Great question. I've had, since 2004, over 3,000 people come through.
Okay.
And that has been extremely educational for me, learning the wide diversity of kinds of people, their values, why they're coming here, everything. There's a application now you have to fill out to come. So I've set a barrier so that I want people who, first of all, have already studied the place a little bit. They know where they're going. Because I don't want people to come here and have a bad time because they're surprised that there's composting toilets or something, or that it's an actual forest. Some people are scared when they first get here. That's fine. By the third night, they're not as scared. So the attributes I look for are people who are dynamic. People who are actively thinking about who they are and what kind of world they want to exist. And we certainly don't have to agree on how that can work out. In fact, I don't want to pick one narrow kind of person. I want a diversity of people. Mm-hmm. I want people who are fairly self-aware of who they are so that they can adjust and work well with others.
Okay.
I want people who are not too afraid. For some people, it is a tough place to be just because it's different. There's coyotes howling at night. There's might be a lizard in your cabana or something. Most people are fine with that. Some people love it. Some people are like, this is a cool adventure. I think it's great. And other people are fairly uncomfortable because it's outside the scope of what they're used to. I think just being up for it, being a good attitude of like wanting to be here is good. Recently, we've had an increasing number of specialists, people who are focused on one particular thing that they're very good at, either professionally or because it's their passion. And that's really a thrill to have those people here. It could be dance, it could be acro yoga. I especially like it when people come here and they're into filming things and documenting. I've thought about inviting more YouTubers here, so they're bringing in their own passion, interests, and their own audience. Mm-hmm. And then they use this place as a set.
Yeah.
That's awesome. People who are into making a particular kind of food. I mean, we've had people from different countries here, and they make the famous food from their country. That culturally enriches the place. It's fun.
Yeah.
So specialists of different kinds. We've had botanists through to identify plants. We now have a great plant spreadsheet of all the kinds of plants here. Not all of them, but a lot of them. We had a mushroom expert come through who identified over 350 mushrooms. Wow. That's in a spreadsheet. So the idea is when somebody comes here is that we want to offer them a template of a whole bunch of activities and things to learn and do, but also they're coming in as a teacher to teach us, and we want to free them up to create and do what they want to do.
Okay, terrific. So what is your vision for the natural environment of Bosque Village?
That's the most important part.
Yeah.
In general, humans are good at destroying everything around them that's natural.
Certainly are.
And so it's very important that the trees, the plants here, the wildlife, are protected and that their needs actually come before ours. This is oak, pine, and madrone forest. It's recovering forest. It was logged quite some time ago, and there were cows here and everything. The goal is to increase biodiversity. And we've been slowly doing that, slowly planting different native and non-native plants and trees. We've also been identifying all the plants so that we can understand our relationship with each one. Mm-hmm. That's been a long process, and to be honest, it's been one of the greatest pleasures for me, is getting to live in such an environment. You know, it takes years to just get slowly tuned into the natural cycles of things. You know, when do these kinds of trees lose their leaves? How does this affect the ground underneath it? Slowly getting to know what insects there are, watching as the bird diversity increases, because there's birds here that are here now that have become more rare over time and weren't here, and now they're coming back. That's true for other wildlife as well. Sometimes the wildlife is actually annoying because it, you know, gets in your house or it has conflict with the dogs or whatever. So yeah, it's basically increasing biodiversity, protecting what there is, enhancing what there is, and making sure that our role as we're here actually builds up the natural system instead of destroys it.
Sure. Yeah, that's paramount. So you gave the name San Galileo to the eventual town that hopefully will exist on this property. Do you have a blueprint for how this town would look?
Yeah, and it's not perfect, but it's developing a little bit over time. The idea is that Bosque Village is the project, the laboratory for experimenting with how we can live and how we cook and how we, you know, store food, mm-hmm. everything. But the eventual goal is to have a replicatable town. And I put the name San Galileo on it, which is Saint Galileo.
Yeah.
That's a joke. If anybody doesn't understand it, you can learn about Galileo. And the idea is that this is a big enough space for probably a couple hundred people to live. And if all of those people are agreeing to certain social contracts about how we work together, how we deal with each other, then we can actually build a community unlike any I've ever heard of. The term intentional community gets used for creating intentional communities. It's not a commune. Communes imply co-ownership of a lot of things. There may have to be some co-ownership. In general, I'm avoidant of co-owning things because it creates conflict. Even in a couple, you know, co-owning children or co-owning a house often disintegrates into some of the worst things you can imagine. So I'm suspicious of that. But if you get enough people together and they have this goal of protecting the environment, living off the grid without outside water or electric, living simply, all building each other up. So I'm trying to help you in your skills. I'm trying to build you into the most amazing playwright in this case that I can. And you're trying to build me up in what I do. If we're trying to reduce sources of conflict and you know, we're thinking about, I mean, there's all these things when you create a community. It's almost a standard list of flaws that they have. It's so common, the types of conflicts. I believe that we can identify those and we can reduce them just like we would reduce sicknesses in a body. You know, that we can go through and say, okay, all the communities have this problem. What agreements can we make? What structural changes can we make? And I've been studying this my whole life. I think it's possible, and it's the details. It isn't just, oh, we'll all just be good people. We'll get together, hold hands and sing, and we're all reasonable, right? It'll just work out because we're good. No, it won't. It never does, you know? And so we have to not be so idealistic and everything. We have to be idealistic, but not be ignorant, you know, that we're going to have these conflicts. Mm-hmm. So let's deal with them with love, with empathy, with caring, and a lot of pragmatic thought about, you know, how does the money work? You know, how do we make a decision about building something? How do we use time? How do we deal with noise pollution? There's thousands of things. So that's the vision, is that before I die, I want to collect the people who are already agreeing to certain social contracts, so we're not just making them up together. Try and make that function, look at what's not working, use technology to facilitate that. Because one of the problems in intentional communities is you have to have these meetings all the time and rehash over everything. And anybody new that comes in, you then have to talk about every dang thing. And it's just this constant, annoying social struggle, right? And even if you think you're going to have consensus decision making or something, often it's powerful personalities kind of controlling it under the table, and who's sleeping with who and who's pissed off at who still because of that thing that happened 3 years ago, and economic imbalances. All these just colossally messed up problems. We can solve those, and to do that and document it in wikis, to have voting systems online so that you can remember what decisions you made, using the technology to help you have conversation at a greater meta level. That's something nobody's tried. Nobody's doing it at this level. And if we can succeed at that, then we have a replicatable set of solutions. We have something that somebody else somewhere in the world can say, hey, I really like what they're doing there in Bosque Village. I really like how San Galileo's functioning, except for that dumb thing they did in 2022. And I would change this because of my values and my friends and my culture. But I'm going to take that as a template. And I'm going to get my friends together. I'm going to say, look, what if we did this? And those friends are going to say, well, what about that? What about that? And they can actually construct a social culture that they want to live in. Not the one that they were given by their parents, not the one that their religion told them that they have to have, not the one that their government says they have to live in, but the one that they want to live in. Mm-hmm. That will be success. That's success when somebody can replicate it, copy it, and at that point we're doing social experimentation around the world, and we can actually build a better world.
Yeah, right on. So you have a nonprofit. How is that going?
Right. A lot of this project has been me in the forest figuring out what I'm doing. It's time to kind of formalize it. So we have formed a nonprofit in Mexico. It's called an AC, an Asociación Civil. The name of it is Alianza Intercultural Sustentable. So the Intercultural Sustainable Alliance. The purpose of that is to formalize the project so that we can work with other foundations, so that we can set things up to get donations from people, so that we can have kind of government stamp of approval. And also it's a reminder that we really have to formalize our product. If our product is ideas, if our projects are going to be scientific, then we need to document them well. We need to take it seriously like a job. And so that's been in process for a couple of years. We're still learning about things like accounting, all the laws related to them. We need help on that. The hope is that in a very short period we'll be partnering with different foundations that have similar ecological goals, similar goals with having the culture in Mexico work with other cultures, similar goals with energy system development, and artistic endeavors. And so there's a lot of aspects of the project. It's a little bit hard to conceive of, but I see these partnerships as being a really important part of our future. If I have a flaw, or one of many, it's that I'm too independent. I want to do my own thing, and that's not how this is going to succeed in the future. We need to be partnering with other people in many ways.
Okay. And so what are your plans for funding Bosque Village?
Funding, yeah. The Bosque Village has been funded by me. It's funded by work I did since I was young. I saved up well, and I lived cheaply. I still live cheaply. And I went as far as I could funding it myself. That's been great. Can't do it anymore. So here's the ways that I can fund it now. One is by charging people to come here. A lot of people are excited by the project. It's not a resort. If it was a resort, an eco resort or something, I could certainly follow a normal model. People could come and pay and be perfectly happy. But this is hopefully a life-changing experience for people. So some people will pay to come. Other people are donors. We started getting people saying, hey, I want to help. How can I help? In fact, they've been saying that for years, and I've always said, oh, I don't know. Well, now I know how they can help. They can donate. And so we've gotten really dedicated donors now. The total donation amount is not very much. That's got to change. But we're working on also serving our donors, getting better input from them as far as what they want to see. And the cool thing about this project is that when people donate, they can see the videos, they can see what we're writing, and they can see what they're paying for. Mm-hmm. So that's been exciting to invite them as part of the team. Also, those donors can help make it so that some people can come here and not have to pay as much. So we can invite locals who don't have the resources to participate, and that increases our ability to influence people locally as well. So participants, donors. Another one is foundations. Now that we're a nonprofit, there are foundations out there who are looking, what kind of projects can they support? And we've recently applied for a couple of grants of people who are looking for innovative projects to fund. That would be fantastic. And again, it could be a interchange of ideas. They could send people from their foundation down and everything. Another option is corporate sponsors. They could sponsor because they like the project. Additionally, there are products we actually like. Even though we're trying to break away from almost all consumption, we're trying to remove ourselves from civilization as much as we can. We then have this opportunity to say, okay, well, you know what? This kind of tool really is good. We're going to use an axe. We're going to cut firewood. We're going to have computers because we want to publish what we're doing. We're going to have cameras. Cameras and computers are absolutely important for publishing our work. We're going to have solar ovens. I'd like to see us have an entire solar kitchen with every kind of solar oven there is, evaluating each one of them and in what kind of cases those would work or not. So there are exciting products that we could have as sponsors here. We can show them in videos. If people know of a product that they really believe makes a better world, I want that product here. And it could be things as simple as tents. Right now we could expand housing really quickly by having tents. We also want to train people on how to travel better. This gets into deep travel. And so we could have a day pack when people show up and it could have all of the things you really need to survive using less energy. So I'm pro reviewing of products, and we're open to people sending products down for us to evaluate. What else? Affiliate program. Some of those products we put in our wiki and people can click on a link to it on Amazon or whatever. And then if they click on that link for the next 24 hours, anything else they buy, we get a cut. We haven't made any money on that at all. YouTube videos, the kind of videos we make probably aren't going to go viral. And they probably aren't going to make us any money. But there are YouTubers that do make money. So who knows? That's another option.
So you have many locations in these 83 acres, which could be used to stage productions. You have, sort of natural amphitheaters that just need a little bit of help to make them, fully comfortable. So my next question is, how do art and performance fit into the Bosque culture?
Right. As we think about designing culture, right? Everybody knows we need to figure out better agriculture and energy systems. But culture goes far beyond that. And I have a lot of theories about how we can change how culture works for us in society. This place is a stage. Everything we're doing, we want to broadcast. I would like to have more music here. I would like to invite musicians playing non-amplified music so it doesn't kind of disrupt the space. It's a very quiet, peaceful space. I want them when they're here to be writing their own music, to be focused on that, mixing with other musicians, thinking about who they want to be as a musician. And then we have other people here ready to record them so we can do higher quality videos. They can get out there right away. I also want musicians and other creators to learn about Creative Commons, which is a way to create something and give it out to the world for free. We also do that with our other designs, our energy designs and ecological designs. So the idea is about recapturing our culture. Right now, music is a great example. Music is all owned by someone. You can't just make a video and then use somebody else's music in it and publish it because somebody owns that music. And in many other ways, we don't own our culture. 200 years ago, you could go to a town, play your music, and then when you leave, somebody else can take your ballad, your song, change a few things, and now they have that music. We used to own the music in our culture, and we don't own it anymore. We're consumers of our own culture. So there's things about music and things we can change. Theater, I know you're into theater. We could do the same thing here where we take theater that's out of copyright and we could perform it here. Mm-hmm. We could make new versions of it. And other people around the world can do that too. Each year, more and more things are exiting copyright. And so those become part of the culture we now own again. Old movies are going out of copyright. We could remake some of those movies here. There's no barrier. And now the barrier to making movies is almost nothing. We have cameras, we've got sets, we've got people, we've got costumes, we've got props. Mm-hmm. Let's make our own movies.
Yeah, for sure. So a very different question now. What roles do domesticated animals have at Bosque?
Domesticated animals, right. This gets into agriculture and even the history of humanity. The relationship we have with domestic animals is not always very good. The way we use them now, as you're probably aware, in the industrial system, a lot of them suffer a lot. We eat meat that's contaminated, that travels very far. We eat too much of it. It's bad for our health. So we start out by rejecting it. Let's just start out by saying, okay, no domesticated animals. Of course, we're going to include us in it. I don't think we're quite ready to get rid of us. But we're the biggest problem domesticated animal. First one we're going to add back in is dogs. I like dogs. They evolved from wolves. They kept getting closer to us. The relationship grew. Now they're our genetic friends. And here, they're a great part of the security system. Here, dogs are a great part of the security system. They make this place safer. And dogs have been following you around at night, right?
Yes, Mayhem likes to come to my cabana.
Yeah. And do you feel a little safer?
Well, I'm not really intimidated by the darkness, I guess, because of summer camps that I've gone to. But I do like the noise. I like to hear her, running down the path. And then when she gets to me, I say hi to her and stuff, and then she runs ahead. Cabron has also done that, and Sheba barks quite a bit. So it's really pleasant and it's comforting, but it's not like for me like an improvement of security.
Right. Yeah, but they do have a security role. There are people who are afraid to come here because they're afraid of the dogs.
Sure.
I like that.
Yeah.
When I first showed up here, coyotes would come right up to the house and look at me.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't mind that because I'm not afraid of coyotes. And in some ways, the dogs are bad because they scare away some wildlife. But then again, I don't want skunks in my house, that has happened.
Well, I think, it depends on point of view. If I were a thief and this was my target, the dogs would register with me as a security issue.
Yeah.
So I think that they're effective in that regard.
Yeah, so dogs we've accepted. The next one is chickens.
Yes.
We have chickens, and I have more of them right now than I had before. Mm-hmm. I find that they're easy to care for. They give you eggs, which is an animal product, an animal protein thing. I realize there are some people that would be against that. For me, it's an acceptable solution. They also eat food waste, so there is zero food waste here. In fact, we go to town and we pick up food waste at the market and bring it back here to give to the chickens.
Desparasitos.
Right. And then the chickens produce fertilizer, which we can then use to reproduce plants. So it really seems like a winning system. So I'm very into the chickens. The other animal that I've been doing at times is raising rabbits. I'm not currently doing it because I have so many vegetarians come through. But I started raising rabbits. I raise them colony style, so they don't have cages or anything. They're just running around in a huge area. I want to make sure any animal we have here has a pretty good life, that they seem happy and healthy. So the rabbits were fun. They reproduce like crazy. They live under the ground, and then they come out when they're cute little babies. They grow up, and they have a good time. Also, those particular animals can eat forest plants. So if we're cutting branches next to a trail, so if we're cutting branches next to a trail, we can toss those plants into the pen and they'll eat those. Have to be a little bit careful because there's a couple poisonous plants we don't want to give them. Mm-hmm. Those rabbits also give us furs. We learn to tan the hides. And I don't have a lot of ways to make my own clothing. And even though self-sustainability is not the actual goal of the place, it's a good general direction to go in. So being able to make my own clothes just seems so cool. We waste no parts of the rabbit. And so that's something I think pencils out really well. In fact, if we look at meat on a worldwide scale, I think we should not be eating so much beef and big things with hard hooves that compact the ground, that need so much care. Rabbits are a wonderful scale. You know, you kill a rabbit and you've just fed your family for a few days. Whereas a cow, if you kill a cow, you've got a lot of meat to deal with. Certainly pigs would be another type of option. Again, a little big for me. Other domesticated animals that will come to mind would be goats. People raise goats around here for meat. They'll eat anything, so they'll eat the forest plants. They are a little hard to manage because, well, I mean, I'm a Capricorn. I know what goats are. They're kind of a pain in the ass. You know, they'll go right over your fence. They'll eat your shoe. And the other thing is, you know, for milk, goats would be an odd choice. In fact, dairy in general, I'm not that into because you have to artificially keep the animal lactating. So they have their baby, you take their baby away, and then you keep milking them to keep them lactating. It just seems a little weird to me. Horses for transport are an option. My van will eventually die, and I've thought about when my van dies, not getting another gasoline vehicle. Also, I find horses a little intimidating. I've thought about burros. And I think of all the options I can think of right now for other domesticated animals, burros are right up there at the top. And that's because they're not as intimidating to me as horses. They can carry stuff like firewood. I could go into town and buy things there, supplies, and bring them back. Also, and this is a little silly, I suppose, but they're just so cute. I mean, a baby burro, I don't know what's more cute than that, you know, and so I'm thinking burros. Also, they're currently a little bit endangered, not critically endangered, but there's less burros than there used to be here in Mexico because they're being skinned and their hides are being sold to China. So I could actually be part of kind of making sure we don't lose burros. What am I forgetting? What other? I'm not going to do ostriches.
Mm-mm. Well, those are the animals that we've talked about.
Yeah. The one other animal would be other types of poultry. Mm-hmm. I could do geese.
Okay. Ducks. You mentioned ducks.
Ducks are very cute, so that'd be tempting as well. But in general, and we talked about this as well, domesticated animals are a pain. Mm-hmm. If you're going to choose animal-based products or plant-based products, plant-based is way easier. Mm-hmm. Because if you have an animal, then you're signed on to take care of that animal. And I believe this is an important commitment you make to make sure the animal is safe, healthy, happy, lives a good life. And so I'm cautious to set myself up for a lot more work. If I plant things like nut trees or fruit trees, I can ignore them for years, mm-hmm. and everything can be all right.
Yeah.
So.
And so how does spirituality factor into this lifestyle?
Spirituality is an interesting topic for me, a somewhat difficult one. I've studied spirituality all my life, many forms. I grew up in a very spiritual environment. I guess in this space, the spirituality that I want to promote, that I want people to experience while they're here, is trees, the wind, the moon, the stars, relationship with plants, and getting back to the first spirituality we ever had, which was nature. You know, mm-hmm. and you could see that as pantheist, you could see that in various more formal ways, but I don't see a need to formalize it. Mm-hmm. I think it can just be this, everything that is.
So tell me about your philosophy of food.
Food. Food is almost a spiritual topic. In our day-to-day lives, no matter where you live, food is probably the most powerful thing you're involved with. Food is your biggest choice. How you eat affects the whole world. It affects your body. It affects the people around you. It affects the energy systems you're using.
Personality.
Personality even, yeah, everything. And so food decisions here are difficult because, of course, with having a diverse group of people come here, they're all used to eating a certain way. And they have an immense attachment to that. So what we have to do here is define what we eat and why. And I want to get into all the details on that. For example, I have a spreadsheet that has every ingredient we use here. And I want to consider every ingredient. Where do we get it from? Why do we eat it? Should we eat it? What's the effect of the supply chain and how it got here? Is there slave labor involved? Sometimes chocolate, coffee is made with slave labor, sugar. Maybe we shouldn't have those things, or maybe we need to investigate up the food chain and where it came from, up the supply chain. So doing that, we know we've got there. We are in Mexico, and a lot of people really want Mexican food. A lot of Mexican food is not at all healthy. In fact, there's an oncoming diabetes epidemic and obesity in Mexico. So how can we look at Mexican food and say, okay, we want Mexican food, how can we eat healthy versions of it? Mm-hmm. How can we have less meat? How can we have less oil? So we want to consider all the aspects of all these ingredients and how we use them. We want to consider, if something's in season or not, because we want to eat it when it's in season, and maybe we can preserve it for another time. We want to consider where that ingredient came from. Mm-hmm. What was the effect of the labor that produced it? What's the effect on the land? How far away did it come from? How much gasoline was used to get it here? What effect does it have on our health? What's its cost? How can we eat cheaply and healthily? There's just so many aspects to even just the ingredients. And then how we combine those into what meals we have. For example, we're in Mexico. We're going to eat a lot of Mexican food. People like it. People like to eat food that they're used to. But then how can we make Mexican food that's actually healthy? Because we have a growing epidemic of obesity and diabetes. So by making the right choices, we can have food that people like, but is also healthy versions of it. In terms of energy, how can we not be using propane, not be using electricity for cooking? How can we use the sun? How can we cook with the sun whenever possible? And then if we can't cook with the sun, how can we cook really efficiently with wood? Or maybe in many cases we don't have to cook some things at all and we just get more of a raw food diet. So the food philosophy here doesn't follow any one way of doing things. Mm-hmm. It's looking at all the factors and making decisions, very conscious decisions about how we eat. Now in this space that's perhaps easier to do than others, because if you live in the city you're just bombarded with all these options, and it might be hard to be kind of more purist. Although I'd be very curious to hear about people's attempts to have that kind of control over their food in an urban environment.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So Brian, what are your plans for future products to be developed at Bosque?
Well, the other products we can develop are things that people can create here, often as an activity for them. So we have clay for pottery. I can easily imagine that we could be teaching people how to make pottery and then make some pottery. We can use wood to fire it. Although it would be really cool to have a solar firing system for that. I don't know if that's possible. We've made things with winumo, pine needle baskets. So almost any kind of craft we can think up. There's a long list of potentials. All of the crafts that are made in Michoacan, the state we're in right now, are potential things we could make here. We could even bring in people who are experts in that to have people learn. A lot of that is to provide an activity for the participants. I'm not expecting to make a lot of money off of crafts we make. It's possible, who knows? I mean, maybe we could make things here and sell them in New York and LA and London. But I'm less concerned about that. And more interested in, I guess, giving people experiences of what they can create when they go back in their own lives. There are things, for example, we can can things here. So we could make pesto. I grew tobacco for a while. I could sell organic tobacco. I've decided not to do that because I'm not a big fan of tobacco. I've grown things that I tried to sell and couldn't sell. We grew chilacayotes and squash, and everybody grows chilacayotes and squash. So the amount that I can sell those for is not worth it, not worth the time. So as we think about products, really we need to be serving ourselves, making products that we want. So we're kind of the first customer that matters. And then as far as other customers, I think art is probably good. I should be selling my own art. I've been hesitant to do that because I see my paintings as kind of like babies. So it's difficult. But at the same time, I don't want to hoard them. I want to get them out there. My babies should fly free. There are a lot of ideas. I mean, and we're open to more ideas. We could set up a forge. I know a guy near here who's a knife maker. Mm-hmm. So he has a forge and he uses traditional knife making and sword making techniques and makes big fancy swords. We could either help him sell his products. We could also set up a forge here. And people could come, make things, and then sell them or not. So yeah, I mean, the idea of selling products is great. And I'm more interested in the activity of making them and learning how to make them and then having other people reproduce that than I am interested in relying on that as an income source.
Okay.
That was a good addition. You like that?
And what's your vision for the natural environment of Bosque?
Ultimately, as we imagine this extremely biodiverse environment, I want to have as much different wildlife here as possible. I want to have such a diversity of plants that scientists come here and study them. And really, if you think big picture here, let's talk about climate change, all right? And this is an example of how we're trying to solve world problems at a very personal level. If there is rapid climate change, a lot of life will die because it existed in a place that it can no longer exist in its new climate. So if it could have lived in a zone 500 kilometers away, now it can't live 500 kilometers away, but maybe it could live here. Well, what we want to do is collect all these different genetic packages, trees, for example. And so when there's climate change, we've already got trees planted here that didn't really want to be here before, but now are in the new climate that they want to be in, and they can reproduce. I call that planting for climate change. This is real preparation for a very difficult future, kind of like a genetic Noah's Ark in a way. And we don't know. Will it get hotter here, colder, wetter, drier? I mean, we're guessing hotter, but I see that as a really interesting thing. Just as, for example, up in Norway, I think it is, you have the seed bank. They have a seed vault that's built into the ground to protect these seeds. Well, that's cool. Very difficult task, way beyond what I can do. But I can see this place as a living seed vault where we have trees that we germinated, that we planted, that couldn't survive maybe on their own here now. But with climate change, they might become the new dominant plant life. That's a strange goal that nobody has. I think the first step on having a very diverse environment in terms of living systems is to try to understand what we have now. Mm-hmm. And so having botanists, entomologists, biologists come in and help us identify what there is really important. That's exciting. It fulfills my curiosity needs. But also, even if we don't understand it all, if we just don't destroy it, if we increase microclimates, the plants will do the real work. And that's an anti-scientific point of view. It's just what I'm saying, I guess, is we don't have to understand or think we understand the complexity of the systems in order to get out of the way, stop destroying it, and even encourage it to flourish. Plants don't even know their own names. That doesn't matter. We just have to stop killing it and let it flourish. Ooh, I'm being all eloquent and shit. Okay, what else you got?
So how do you see art and performance fitting into Bosque?
There's a lot of other details to how art fits in with our lives. And part of it is entertainment. I'm disturbed that so many of the ways we entertain ourselves are ways in which we're not even involved. We're just consumers. Mm-hmm. So I want us to get back into the idea that we are ourselves the creators. You know, you imagine people wanting to hear music 200 years ago. Well, they got around the piano and they sang together. That's very different than sitting in the audience and looking at people on the stage and they make the music. I'm very against this kind of authoritarian view of the artist or creative as being that much different. They're the creative God. They're better than you. You know? No, it's us. We're okay. If we want to, we can write a play. Now, you've already written plays. You've already written novels. But I can also write novels and plays. And you're not a musician. I'm not a musician. But we can be cavemen, bonking on a log and making some rhythms we like around the fire. You know, I think we can do that. So I don't like this barrier between the official art creators and the rest of us. I want to give permission in this space to be a bad artist. And that's even not how I want to say it. Bad? No, a living artist. That being part of your culture. And that's so not popular now. I mean, everybody has these gods, you know, well, what's your favorite band? You know, my favorite band is my friends who have a band. I like them because I can buy a beer for them, you know? And so maybe I don't end up playing music. I hear this, though, with people, like, you know, I say, okay, let's draw some stuff. And they're like, oh, I don't know, I'm not creative. Really? I can fix that. And mainly it's by taking the shackles off you. Mm-hmm. You know, you can doodle. You're on the phone, you're doodling. You're making art, you're painting. Let's make that doodle 2 meters big. Let's throw some paint at stuff and say, well, that looks like crap. What if we do that to it? Well, that kind of looked good. Let's do more of this thing, you know. Let's stack some rocks. You want to get primitive with it, you know. Let's stack some rocks and say, cool stack of rocks. You look at somebody like Andy Goldsworthy. He's an artist that goes out in the woods and he just picks natural things and puts them in patterns, you know. And he'll probably spends hours and hours doing it because some of them are pretty cool. And then he takes a picture of it. And that picture is the artwork. The picture's the artwork. And we can do that. You know, we can play with it all, just everything's an art material. You talk about theater, right? We're playing our roles right now. I'm playing Brian. You're playing the playwright. Okay. You know, and we're winging it. It's improv, perhaps. Sometimes I'm saying stuff I already said before. And we talk about all the world's a stage. Mm-hmm. Well, this is it. And this, in that sense, when we look at art and performance, we can give ourselves permission to expand our role, to not be limited, to not say, hey, you know, you got to act this way. You know, that's kind of who you are, isn't it? That's like, just stick in your role. No, we can say, I'm going to be a weirdo today, and tomorrow I'll be a different kind of weirdo. And I'll try talking too loud. I'll try being a philosopher. Just removing these limits. And that is the art of life. That's being freer. And we have to do that even at the child level. Where one of the things I want to do is set up Kid Bosque, Kidville, where from the very youngest age, we give kids the freedom to throw a stick around, to dig a hole, to get hurt, to explore, to make up stories about what they think, how they think the world works. And so I don't want that to go away, and I want to recapture it for the kids. A lot of these kids live in such constrained environments, and they're so afraid, and their families are so afraid. Here, I want to set the space for them to do that. And we think of that for kids, that's so important for their creativity. What about us? You know? So art and performance, I don't see a lot of limits on it. I do want to make product. I want to make product we share. I think that's an important part of the process. But let's free ourselves up. Another thing I think I can contribute here in the local community is to work on food security. Food storage is not very common here. So if there's a disruption in the food chain, there'll be severe problems very quickly. What I can do with that is plant more plants that grow with no irrigation and no fertilizer, just all over the place, and encourage others to do it as well. And that might even be plants that aren't that popular to eat. Certainly there should be nopales everywhere. Maybe we don't want to eat nopales every day, but if we have nopales everywhere, we'll never have a lack of food. We can always eat nopales. I plant nut trees. Well, those are going to take decades and decades to reproduce, to provide fruit, but I want to put more of those in. And so I want to put in things that aren't profitable now, but that could be profitable later. So for food storage, one of the things I'd like to encourage is root cellars. Secure places to store a lot of food. I think that makes your society stronger, better able to recover if or when there's a natural disaster or societal disruption. I think we should always have, a year or so of food stored, grains, etc. And that makes us stronger. Fermentation is super fun. We do a fair amount of it here in the Bosque, and that's another way of storing food, but also changing food to be a probiotic. It's very healthy, very tasty, and so I'd like to introduce things like kimchi and other methods of fermentation into the culture, just to make it better. Even though I'm not into dairy a lot, I would like to increase the types of cheese available and to diversify that a little bit as well.
Is there anything else that you want to add?
On community projects? As I've thought over the years, there are a lot of things that I would like to contribute to the local community. These folks are friends and neighbors, and for example, a lot of them work up in California in the wineries, and I wonder, why don't we have grapes growing here? So I would like to be an instigator in getting more grapes here, identifying which ones work well in this climate, and growing them. It can take a long time to develop vineyards, but we can start experimenting with different kinds of grapes. We could try grafting them onto native grapes, and then once those exist, we can try and build a wine culture. I know in California it took many decades to build a wine culture there. So let's get started and do that.
So the last question that I have for you, Brian, is how do you measure the success of Bosque Village?
I wonder about that quite a bit. For the short term, it's survival. For the short term, it's developing funding so that I can continue. Also for the short term, it's organizing all of the things I've learned over the last 14 years, all of the media I've produced, and making that easier to share with people. So putting everything I've learned on Quora, on YouTube, etc. Longer term, I have to find people who want to be invested in it and live here, and so we can develop a more functioning community. I have a lot of short-term people, and that's been great, but it has to be longer-term people.
Okay.
The next stage is I have to be ready to die. I'm going to die sometime. And right now, if I die, this project will be a failure, because this land had all become avocado farms. And so I have to set these systems up so that once I die, the land goes into an ownership state of some kind that protects it. Mm-hmm. Now, that might mean that it goes to the nonprofit, if the nonprofit's functioning well. It might mean that it gets broken up and parts are given to people who have the same idea, and that it continues as kind of sub-projects of it. I don't know, but that's absolutely on my mind every single day. And then long term, what really matters is that we can see some difficult times for the future of the world. We see world problems that are critical and will probably cause the collapse of civilization. So the goal is to have solutions in place that people can copy so that that collapse isn't total, so that we can perhaps even avoid a lot of parts of it, and that the future is one we can really have hope in. And that's perhaps the ultimate product long term, is that we have hope, that we can take action, you and me, wherever we're at, anywhere in the world, we can implement cultural solutions to have a peaceful, prosperous world that's biodiverse, and humanity will continue it all.
Okay. That's great. Thanks for talking to me.
Thanks for talking to me, man. And it has been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Our conversations off camera have been really fun. They bounced all over the place. The playwright is thinking about big topics. Hopefully you'll read some of his novels someday and see some of his plays.